Hello. Today I am going to be talking about some quotes that I have gathered from this book that I am reading that is called Overcoming Overeating by Those Two People. I found this book at my late grandmother's house and brought it home to read, and I'm actually going to give it to my father because this could help him a lot. So what I'm going to be doing is just sharing myself and reading some quotes that I have recorded that I found poignant and then giving perspective. Quote, "We know that you, as a compulsive eater or chronic dieter, regard food as your problem." Unquote. So right there we simply have what one would think to be an obvious delusion where the internal movement of self is defined by and projected onto food, so that the obvious situation is very much ignored. Separation, having an emotional relationship projected towards food instead of standing as the responsibility to be able to consider what you're doing in your world. Quote, "If your hand or your mind moves towards food when you're not at all hungry, you are, by our definition, a compulsive eater. You are compelled to think about food or how your body looks in situations where such thoughts have no logical place. We use the word compelled because we know that you have no control over these thoughts. They simply crop up in your mind." Unquote. Yeah, that's how it works. They just pop up in there. I mean, it requires me to be in a state of mind. It's almost like a zombie-like state of mind where it's just like, and then thoughts just come along and apparently are who I am, these thoughts. Quote, "Compulsive eaters share not only their compelling need for food, but a view of their problem as well. All compulsive eaters consider themselves lacking in discipline and willpower. Self-indulgent, greedy, infantile, out of control, weak, disgusting, and most important, fat. Fat, skinny, or in between, all compulsive eaters feel fat. When they say that they feel fat, they are really saying that they are bad." Yeah, I mean, I have had experiences where, it's obvious that I'm not overweight, but I swear to God, I would, if I had a little bit of provocation from my environment, I would totally believe that I was dangerously overweight. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, and I've heard that problem in many places. Like, I think that's very, very common these days. It's ridiculous how fast things have just grown into this huge society. Like, that's probably a huge problem today that may or may not have existed a couple hundred years ago. But now it's like just massive. I've also seen that used to sell products. That feeling fat, that like feeling of like feeling bad, defined as fat. And that was like a really, really interesting, deep, meaningful thing to me when it says fat, skinny, or in between, all compulsive eaters feel fat. When they say that they feel fat, they are really saying that they are bad. That's exactly what I'm doing. Exactly. And I'm not really aware that I've accepted this definition as a state of mind, and so it just becomes feeling fat when it's really not even about that. It would exist with or without this definition of fatness, that bad, and that's like really fucked up, because that's like probably from childhood, is that experience of feeling bad. Like, a lot of this stuff seems to be directly relatable to how adults treat children. The fight back response. Dr. Janet Polivy and Dr. Peter Herman have done extensive research at the University of Toronto to demonstrate that the restraints of a diet lead to a binge, regardless of the personality, character, or starting weight of the dieter. Through years of clinical practice, we have concluded that dieters are like tightly wound springs. The more restrained the dieter, the tighter the string. Once a dieter goes off his or her diet, the spring releases. The tighter that spring has been wound, the more forceful its release. The more restrictive the diet, the bigger the binge. Yes, so again, that separation where food is believed, I mean, it's so obvious, but food is believed to be the source of the problem when it's actually the individual. I mean, it's just very, very, like, how much do we have to be neglecting each other for this kind of delusion to be allowable? For people to be able to be experiencing this on such a mass scale, and then still be able to go out and function in the world and keep it a secret. How is this even possible unless the mutually accepted self-neglect as so neglectful that it could also probably, under legal terms, be called abuse? I mean, how can that even be possible unless that neglect and neglect as abuse is just so massive? And then the next phrase is, okay, so I'm going to finish that last quote and then start the continuation of it. The more restricted the diet, the bigger the binge. Every diet, regardless of how long its book has been on the bestseller list, regardless of whether it tells you to count calories or grams, regardless of whether it tells you to eat grapefruit or bean sprouts, represents a spring, readying itself for release. I don't agree with that statement, because what it seems to be doing towards dieting seems to be the problem that's already been established with separation towards food. We know that you, as a compulsive eater or chronic dieter, regard food as your problem, and then saying that every diet, regardless of how long its book has been on the shelf, regardless of how popular it is, regardless of what it tells you, is in itself like a spring readying itself for release, and you as the individual have no participation in that whatsoever. That seems to be the same kind of separation applied towards the diet, when in fact the diet, I mean, it would better be said that almost every diet on the market today has been created from an understanding and movement from the starting point of self-judgment and separation.